Yeah, so
Wow.
we are now recording, but I
I
guess
put
just
on
the
lip gloss, so I'm good to go.
flip class. What's that?
Yeah, lip
Um,
gloss.
yeah, no. So no, I'm just kidding.
Okay, I was like, you know what a duvet is? That's
Birds,
not it.
Birds Bees.
No, we
Never,
got no EOS.
I never leave home without Birds Bees.
Really? I have
So
Burt's Bees here too, but anyway.
yeah, no, but I guess to somewhat preface, if we use this recording for anything, I get asked all the time about the book process, and
Yeah.
I've had so many great mentors in my years that have spent time with me, so I almost feel obliged to like jump on a call or say something. And kind of the first thing that I ask or I tell them is like, okay, are you writing every single day?
Right.
Right? Like, even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like 30 minutes, whatever that is, like something being written. And one of the things I did with a kid who took me to coffee, like, want to know about the book process, I go, here's what I'll do. Write every single day and send me an email every single day, whether you wrote or whether you didn't.
Right.
Like, you wrote for 15 minutes, I didn't write today. Wrote
Yeah.
for 15 minutes, didn't write, 30 minutes, or however long. And 6 months, he had the manuscript done.
Listen, don't even, you and I, we could preach to the masses right now.
And I, you know, ultimately, like, you want to write a book? Okay, well, start writing.
Start writing.
And then my second piece of advice is create a badass outline. And I now have a new, completely different concept of what a badass outline is after doing my second book. But just do voice memos. Pardon?
Are you Canadian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Flag's in the other room, but.
All right. I just heard it. Go ahead.
No, I don't know. I'm awesome. I almost got attacked by Canadian geese on Canada Day. It was a great experience.
Apropos.
They're ferocious, but they're my nearest relative in Arizona. Yeah, it's like create an amazing outline and just voice memo these stories, and then have that transcribed. Have that transcribed, and like you have the start of a book, right? And this is where I feel most people get so overwhelmed is I have to write 50,000 words or 80,000 words or whatever, and they get like so overwhelmed they don't even know where to start. And you get 5 hours of transcription, like you basically have the first draft done there.
Like, I spent an hour on the phone yesterday with a client, and we just talked, just literally like this. We were on Zoom. I can watch people's body language and see when they get excited or when they start to get uncomfortable. And so I can steer the conversation, talk for an hour. And, she's been trying to get started for months and months and months. She's French, so the whole transcription thing is hysterical. But after after it was transcribed and then I translated the transcription, basically, it's like 7,500 words already.
Yeah, which is, like, a fourth of a book, right? Like, and this is
Wait, what did you just say?
I mean, potentially a fourth of a book, but then I was also going to say that's a completely different subject of what classifies as a book these days, right? Like,
that's right. Let's have a debate on that. We can have a healthy discussion.
No, I don't even like.
I don't have to be right.
Classifies as a book these days, and like,
right.
I think there's like 4 different classifications of books. Okay. And this is my thought. And I would love your thought on it, Elizabeth. Okay. Number 1, traditional publishing. You know the quality that you're going to get. It's not perfect by any means, but it's a good quality book, right? Yeah. Then you have a service like Tucker Max and Book in a Box, now Scribe Media, which they interview you over 6 months and go back and forth, ghostwrite your book. It's a fairly high quality book. Like, it's very respectable, but like, I probably have 5 or 10 of them on my shelf. A lot of my friends have done with them, but like, Did
you do it through them?
I didn't. Okay. I have a lot of friends who have.
Gotcha.
Right? But like, you look at them, they're all formatted the same. They have big spacing, not close to a traditional, right? And then there's self-publishing, which the moment I see CreateSpace or self-publish, I just like, I hate to say it, I just turn it off. Like, I don't have time to read.
This is going to be the greatest thing we've ever done.
And then there's the third model, which is what I tried to do for my book, my new book, The Connection Effect, right?
Like the cover is so great. So before I completely chomp into you on your feelings about self-publishing, I want to say something positive, which is that cover is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And so the fourth type of publishing, and this is where I don't really care. I'll just say whatever. Like the 3 million people who listen to this don't, is where you do it between like publisher and book in a box, right? Like this book is a small publishing company that I may have some say in the publishing company, and you format, like you hire the professionals to do it. You hire the professionals to format it. Like, you know, I'm into this book basically $15,000, which, you know, I could have done book in a box and spent a lot less time at, they just changed their prices, $36,000, or the self-published,
$100,000 depending on which package you go with.
Yeah, exactly. And my first book, like I probably did that for like $2,000 or $3,000, and my biggest mistake was not hiring professional editors from the start and having friends edit it, and like I don't even want to go back and read that book. Like the editing is just so bad in storytelling, and you know, at 25, my ego was God only knows how big, right? But that's I think the 4 characteristics of books in the marketplace right now.
I do not disagree with you, but kind of I do. So I totally agree with those 4 distinctions. I think you've hit those right on the head. So my challenge, for what I do, right, is I work with people. I basically do a hybrid of book in the box, we could say.
Sure.
So in the end, they are publishing it. I do the publishing, but not under my publishing house. So I just teach them how to create an LLC or use their company name or whatever they want. I don't believe in, this is just me, but I don't believe in having, when someone goes down and looks, because people do, to see who your publisher is on Amazon, when it says create space, to me, I'm like, why would you go to all the effort to produce a quality book and then advertise that it's, because that's just, they don't go together. It's your brand. Now your brand is off, okay? So there are so many small presses nowadays that you can create your own and no one will ever have a clue that it's yours or that it's not a hybrid. What you described at the end, where it's like you have the experts helping you with it, first of all, couldn't agree more. You have to have people help, because the biggest challenge is that the barrier to entry is non-existent. So anybody can go out and write what they think qualifies as a book, right? 10,000 words, and never get it edited, and like go design their cover on Canva. And I love Canva, but not
even Canva, on
Create Space. You are correct. You are correct.
That's what I did for my first book. I'll be the first one to admit.
I mean, fair. Gordy, my very first book back in 2003, I went with what I think you would say, I'm not going to say who it is, because I'm not interested in going to jail. It just doesn't seem like a place that I would enjoy. I can't redecorate jail, so that doesn't like.
I've been there. You're not missing much.
Have you? Oh, that's a story. Okay, can get into that. So, well, now you distracted me. Hang on. Okay, so I used one of these like hybrid, what I call a hybrid or a vanity publisher, which is I think who you're talking about. I'm not going to say who it was. I paid them between $8,000 and $9,000. I had the worst editing, the worst. The whole thing was because I had hired the experts, but what I didn't do a lot of research into what that really meant. That's on me. That's on me. Yeah. So I looked at it like, oh my gosh, my editor's here. They're going to design my cover. They're going to do all my publicity. Oh my God. They're going to do all my marketing, my distribution. It was a disaster. And so I had to take the ownership back. And that's when I actually figured out the whole self-publishing thing for myself. But it was the self-publishing that doesn't look like self-publishing. So I hear you. My 2 big things are, you better get an editor and you better get a good cover designer.
Got like 3 editors. Oh my God.
Oh my God. Gordie, it's so bad. And this is the thing that I say to people, like I'm an editor and I get an editor. Like I don't know, do the best hair people do their own hair? No. Right?
I mean, I had multiple on this project, and you still go through it and you're like, oh my God, how did we miss that?
I
like,
know, 100%.
Like, oh, this could have been worded differently, or this, and that's, at some point you got to ship the product, right?
Yeah, of course. But there's human error, if you will, and then there's just egregious oversight. And I think that what's unfortunate, and I'm not trying to be critical at all, but what's unfortunate to me is that because the barrier to entry has become so low, and because the allure of being a published author has become so high, and therefore entrepreneurs specifically have this idea that if I release a book, regardless of the quality, I'm now stepping up in my authority and all these new opportunities are going to come to me. And the exact opposite happens. People are actually ruining their brands because people who have never heard of them are getting a hold of their books and opening it and going, like, I heard such good things about this person, but they can't spell it.
And I think that's also a different, not even like a different conversation. And this is where like people will use this, I don't even know if I'll use a speaker example, but just entrepreneurship of, they become world-class at something and they convince themselves, I can go write a book. Well, they haven't put in the 10 years of learning how to write like they have 10 years of running a business. And you take a professional and they're just gonna like totally destroy, but their first draft is gonna be 100 times better than their second draft. And this is where this more recent book, like, I hired a writer and it really hurt. Like, oh, I'm going to do my book and I'll write it and then I'll send it to you and you'll rewrite it. He's like, let's just save one of the rewrites and let me just like start with the right, and it will be, this quality is 10 times better than anything I would have written or rewritten or tried to rewrite, just like the way
you feel comfortable that it's your story, right? And that it's in your voice and that it's representative of your brand. That's the key.
Well, not like, we did a 60-page outline, right? Like, I created the content, like we created the framework, he interviewed me, and then he took those words and wrote it into, so I wrote a manuscript in 8 days in just a fury and 35,000 words. I was just writing like, 2 or 3 hours a day. And I sent it to him so he knew what my writing looked like.
Yeah.
And he did the review on that book and goes, yeah, this is basically like a free flow of thought. This isn't a book. Like, it's going to take a lot of work to turn this into a book, or we could just start from scratch. And I'm like, no.
I know.
Okay, let's start from scratch. But it's very few people understand the journey, and this is where, like, in the outline and with my writer of what are the goals for the book, right? And is it to get 50 speeches? Is it to become a New York Times bestseller? Is it to get 3 coaching clients? And I'm sure that's something that you work through with your clients, of defining that, which is a completely different book. Like, you're going to write a completely different book to sign up a $50,000 client as you're going to get somebody who you want to sell your $20 hair widget to. Like,
what kind of a book would that be?
Pardon?
What kind of a book would that be?
An ebook of 1,500 words that is a free download.
It was not edited.
No, I'll edit it for them.
All right. Well, okay. So when I work with people, you're absolutely right. But like, they fall into 2 categories typically. One of 2 categories. Well, one, they're entrepreneurs, but within that group, they either want to tell their story because they've been through something. Usually it's whatever got them. Why are you rolling your eyes?
No, because most people think their stories are really good and they're super boring and like uneventful.
Are you serious right now?
pretty serious, but then I have told my story a couple hundred, almost 1,000 times, like for the right niche, right? Like every story has an audience.
Thank you. That's it right there. But I hear what you're saying.
Most people think their audience is 10 million times bigger than it actually is.
Correct. And most people think that, and that's the challenge, is that you've probably heard this: if your book is for everybody, it's for nobody.
Exactly.
And everyone is, I tell people, this is my big piece of advice: write to one person. Whether you're writing your own journey, interesting or not, or you're writing because you want to have your unique tips and tricks and strategies and all that combined with story, because I insist on that, but write to one person. And the amazing thing about that is when you write to one person, that's actually how you attract
a million people or 100,000 people or 1,000 people or whatever the metric is.
When you try to write for everybody, then everybody's confused. They're like, well, wait, does she like blue or does she not like blue? Like, does she like DIY or does she hate recycling? Like, I don't, it's, nobody knows because you're just trying to please everybody, right? So
yeah, I'll be like, I mean, my first book is a 82,000 word therapy session.
Where is that? Is it available?
Yeah, Looting Reality. It's available on Kindle. And it's, it was my journey, right? Like through addiction, through psych wards, through recovery, through growing up, like dating girls, the whole gamut is in there. And it's very unfiltered and very raw.
Dating girls?
Pardon?
What did you say? Dating. Oh,
dating.
I was like, what is that?
Dating girls and like trying to find myself at like 17, 18, 19, like, oh, what's this sex thing all about?
God. Great.
I didn't realize like, oh, if you publish these stories, they might hate you forever.
Oh my God.
Only a handful of people actually know the true characters, right? But I was also, I published that at 25 years old. So the way I think about life now, I was just actually this morning reading an article that Ryan Holiday wrote, who's I think one of the most prolific writers on the planet right now and very original thought. And he's doing a rewrite for his first book that he published at 25. And he's going, oh my God, I was an idiot then. Like, what was I thinking to like say this is gospel and this is like changed and morphed and like my ego and
but it's like ego plus the fact that I think most of us who either write a book or have a book, we're creative. So if you go back, like I go back and look at the first book I did, and it's on its 4th edition now, but like the first edition, I don't even want to acknowledge.
No, it's a process, right?
It is. I mean, it's just kind of a journey, but you have to know. You are so right. So, what was your goal when you?
Which book?
The Connection Effect.
Connection Effect. The goal is to book 50 speeches in the next year.
Okay, and so I noticed it's only available in hardback.
And Kindle.
How come it's?
How come what?
It's not a paperback.
Because I didn't have the designer do a paperback yet. Because I'm like, I spent so much time on this book and I haven't had my cover designs do the different back.
I was just wondering. I love a hardback book. Don't get me wrong. I love a hardback book. But now here's what I'm wondering, because what you can cut this out if we use this somewhere, but like, you don't want to say this, but like, what is your distribution process like? Because I know you've got to be shipping all those, right? Somebody is.
No, I used Ingram Spark.
Yeah.
Because I needed a 2 or 3 week turnaround to have them for my birthday. And it was an interesting quality and interesting process. So I have just really spent the last month delaying number one, getting a trade back cover designing, and number two, finding a new printer. But I just know, like, for my clientele, right, my speech fee, there's a different mindset between a trade back and a hardcover, right? Like, it's, you know, it's kind of a marketing cost, right? And they definitely are not cheap to acquire.
Correct.
But it puts me in a little different league. At least I believe.
I don't disagree. I mean, I think that depending on, I don't know what your speaking fees are, but I can make sort of a guesstimate, an estimated guess, a guesstimate, if you will. And I hear what you're saying, because I remember it was probably, oh my gosh, have you read Freakonomics?
No, I haven't read Freakonomics.
You know what I'm talking about, though?
Pardon?
You know what I'm talking about, though?
Green book, apple on the cover. Yep. Can't think of the author. Who's the author?
There is an apple on the cover, smarty. Yeah. I can't think of who wrote it. But anyway, the author spoke at, it was like American Express or Wells, I can't remember. It was my then husband's company, and they spoke at it. And they gave away this book. And this was in the very beginning of when authors would come and do corporate keynotes and then give away, or their book had been purchased by the company, or, you know, whatever the case was, right? And I remember thinking exactly that. Like, like you couldn't go at that time anyway, you couldn't go into American Express. Now you probably maybe could, I don't know, but with commanding a $15,000 or whatever speaking fee, and then with paperbacks, right? So I get what you're saying. I'm excited for you to get it out in paperback, though, because I think you'll reach even more people than who you're trying to reach.
Well, and, you know, it's a really, is my buyer going to be concerned about the $4 different price point?
That's fair.
And my answer is, if they can't afford the $4, like, they aren't my buyer. It's just a different.
See, you know why I love these kinds of discussions, and I'm so glad we're having this, is because I have some soapboxes that I stand on that I don't get off of, or that no one's been able to get me off of. One of them is editing and cover design. Like, whatever. Beyond that, it's so interesting to me to talk to different people about what their rationale was or is for doing it a certain way. Sure. Because, like, I get what you're saying. You know, I still want you to have a trade paperback, but
I'm not disputing having it, right? Like, it's definitely on the list, but it's like, do I want to book speeches, or do I want to, like, keep doing the non-income producing task, which I've done for 6 months?
100%.
Yeah. Although it should be a little bit more up the total. Like, I mean, I have these designers, right? It's been a month, and, like, I've been promising reviews and video reviews and testimonials, and it's just ultimately a shame on me of not creating the hour, because I know it's kind of like a 3-hour process or 4-hour process or whatever the process looks like, and I've just made it so big in my mind versus, and, like, thought about it for 10 hours versus taking the 2
doing it
to actually do it.
Yeah.
So one of my commitments from this call, I don't even know if I'll do it today or tomorrow. I think I'm taking the weekend off, but on Monday I'll pull out my calendar now, and I'm booking an hour to respond to my editor, my typesetter, and my cover designer.
Okay, I'll check in with you on Tuesday and see if that's been done.
Monday.
I'll hold you accountable.
Cover and inlay.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so what's your, are you, like, comfortable sharing your process for using your book to connect with people who run events at which you want to speak?
Yeah, I just dropped my notepad, so let me grab that.
Okay.
As you know, so I had to write down Monday.
Yeah, exactly. Editor, typesetter.
I want to forget that.
Right.
So my process for getting the book in hands, it's a good question. I mean, this book marketing has kind of been an afterthought. Like, I spent a lot of time over the years, like studying book marketing. And I mean, I was on Steve Harrison webinars almost a decade ago, right? Like anyone in the book space has been on Steve Harrison webinars, right? And he was great.
Yeah.
I don't know where his business is at now, from my experience.
Now that you mention that.
Pardon?
I don't either now that you mention it.
I don't think he evolved with the times, at least what I saw some of the latter courses. And, you know, I've jumped on webinars, write your book in 90 minutes sort of thing. And
Tell me you don't subscribe to that, please.
I don't know who, it was like somebody fairly like respectable that was
I think I know who it was, but I don't want to say.
It was like a joint venture with someone. And I'm like, at the time I like wanted to write a new book. And I was like, yeah, you can do that. It's going to be the first caliber that we were talking about, self-published crap.
You can do it. Oh, there's no doubt that you can do it. But then people are really confused when it doesn't sell.
Well, it's like, write a book in a weekend. Like, I mean, I know friends that have done that and like, oh my God, I wrote a book in a weekend. It's like, no, you wrote 3,000 words or 30,000 words in a weekend. You did not write a book.
You did not write a book.
He wrote free-flowing thought, which is, it's not a well thought out book. So my process using the book is, there's a couple of different things. One, a guy who I use in the introduction, which I don't know, I'll say it as it hasn't been confirmed. He wants to send it as gifts to a lot of his contacts in the podcasting space. And it'll be coming from him. Here's a gift, like I'm featured in this book, and we do a piece of copy. Gordie is a great podcast guest. He'd be great to speak, I don't know what the splitting the fees or whatever that looks like, right?
Yeah, sure.
So that's one thing. Cause I mean, I could send it to all these people, but if I'm sending it to them, it kind of doesn't have the pizzazz.
Yeah.
Versus
if you have the option to have someone else send it on your behalf, yeah.
Yeah, it goes a little bit like, it just has a different ring to it, right? And I also have a lot of wrapping paper in the corner, so I'll probably just like wrap this as gifts and send it as like, I don't know, Joe Schmo to like a bunch of executives or something, and at least that way they'll get through their assistant and they'll open it. I do, and this is like kind of people like, oh, just give your book away. I'm really hesitant of that, like especially like I get so many books. Like, I'm not going to read this. I'm not going to invest 2 or 3 hours of my time or 4 hours or 5 hours or whatever that is. And like getting that commitment, like if you read one chapter, like, okay, that's awesome. That's like, you at least have some kind of opportunity, but you know, for some it's like, I'll just sit it on your shelf, which I mean, you're at least taking up space in their brain and, you know, maybe, but I know I get asked to read books all the time. Just like, this is what
you don't have time with your 90-minute hair routine.
Hey, it might get up to 2 hours. I mean, geez.
It could. It's humidity.
You know, all the things that I'm not doing in regards to marketing. What I did is I made a commitment to myself to read the same 10 books once a year for the next decade.
What are they? Is one of them The Alchemist?
No, The Alchemist isn't on there, but it was in like the final 3 and missed the cut.
I don't even know if I know you.
Like it was one of the books that was really close to making it, and I didn't make it. I'm looking at them. I just sent a photo to my friend. Let's see if I can list them. Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. That book was a game changer for me when I was writing my first book. It's the small things that you do every single day, compounded annually. Same thing at Darren Hardy's compounding effect. He took it from Jeff Olson. And that was where I committed to writing an hour a day for my first book and published it within 6 months. Yeah. Quickly knew it needed to be 2 months, 2 hours a day. The Power of TED, the empowerment dynamic, all about getting out of the victim mentality. A couple of other spiritual books that I'm somewhat, Who Moved My Cheese?
Okay.
Dan Millman's The Power of Spirit, I want to say, which are two like super short books. Yeah. I did those in the same month. And The Complete Works by Florence Shinn, which is a spiritual book, and a lot of Louise Hay's books are based on that. Yep. 4 books in one. The first 2 are good. The second 2 aren't very good. Some of the best affirmations I've ever heard. And Influence by Robert Cialdini.
Okay.
O.G. Manuel, The Sales Bible or Salesperson, Greatest Salesman. I haven't acquired that book yet.
I can't believe that The Alchemist didn't make the cut.
It was close.
It either did or it didn't.
No, it didn't make the cut. But there was another spiritual. Oh, I just read The 4 Agreements. That was last month.
Oh, that one's good.
The 4 Agreements, yeah.
That's real good.
So that one made the cut. It was really between The 4 Agreements and The Alchemist.
Okay, so listen, you've traversed into this completely different area now, which is interesting to me. So, like, you're not a unique breed, but you're part of
one of a kind.
Oh boy. You're part of a unique breed because, so this is why I find this really interesting. Okay. So sometimes I work with people and they're like, so I've said before, do you want to sell 1 book for $1 million or 1 million books for $1? And almost across the board, people, what would you say? I think I know what your answer is. And I
know the hinge that moves the greatest door there. Are we talking like we actually have to do the marketing process or like?
No.
You flip either and it goes at the same.
Yep.
I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? But like if we're factoring in the work to sell 1 million copies versus selling 1 copy.
What's the no-brainer answer for you?
The no-brainer is sell 1 million copies if I don't have to do the work to get in front of 1 million lives. Right? Like
that's it though. Yeah.
It's a lot easier for me to potentially go sell 1 book, an idea for $1 million than to 1 million people. But okay.
100%, right? But like people say to me, I don't want my book to just sit on a shelf. So see, for you, like there's this concept of using a book as a business card, which you are almost doing to the letter. Like, you know what you're doing it right, if I may say so. Because you did the book.
Depends who you ask, but.
Wait, what?
Depends who you ask.
Oh, well, if you ask me, and I'm usually right. I'd say you did it correctly, but you know, like there was a story I heard recently about a guy, I won't name names, but he's a sales expert, and he wrote a book, and he took it, you know, to all these businesses where he wanted to speak, and he used it as a business card, and he was like, here's my book. And it was so poorly done that his info was actually pretty good, but the book was so poorly done that it set up his brand so badly that nobody wanted to really bring him in.
Sure.
It had kind of, the opposite effect. So, but you know what your intention is. You know why it's hardback, because you know who your audience is. You know the demographic in terms of cost and things like that. But then there are other people who are like, I want people to implement what's in my book, which is why I'm assuming you read those 10 books every year, because you don't want to just read them once and then forget. You want to implement.
Been there, done that.
You know? Like you should see my copy of You Are a Badass. It is heavily highlighted, and I have to go back and reread so as to become the badass.
Sure. No, and I think that's the...
I feel like you didn't get, like you weren't really coming on board with me on that.
What are you talking about? You read my book?
No, I read You Are... Do you know You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero?
Oh, yeah, it took me a minute. I haven't read it, but yes, I do know the book because she has a couple of different versions.
Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, it's a lot of information. So in order to be able to really implement it into one's life, sure. You can't just read it once and be done with it and move on to the next thing, because you'll just forget.
You can, but most people don't. Most people do just read it once.
100%.
And I think this, for me, when I look at books, right, like the time investment, the money, it's such a minimal amount, right? Like I buy books all the time just to have them and throw them on my shelf, right? Like I bought this book yesterday. So there's one like my friend wrote, like I bought it just to support him. I think it's a really good book about addiction recovery. Like the chances of me reading this whole book, very minimal, right? And then I bought another book, The Super Connector, this week. Like I've read a couple of chapters like this week. Am I going to read the whole book? Like probably not. Like I'll kind of like flip and I guess for me, like if I look at a book and I invest say 4 hours of time and $20, which is a very like minimal amount. Like we get so many thousands of hours, right? And I would much rather spend 4 hours reading a book than 4 hours watching TV and Netflix, which I don't have either of them at my house. If I get one concept from a book, that's a great ROI, right? And there's a handful of books which can potentially change your life. You know, for me, one of those books is The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. Yeah. Like the principle is the small things that you do every single day, compounded annually, which will change your life. And so for me, I spend 90 minutes every day doing those small things because I know they're going to be compounded and compounded. I have Deep Work. I read that. My writer is like, the first thing he's like, you better read Deep Work. Like
Tommy gave me this. Baker.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, that changed his life as well.
Yeah.
My book is based a lot on that book.
Is it?
Some of the, and you know, a book can change somebody's life. Mm-hmm. And this is like in regards of my book is I made it very short. Like you can read it in 2 hours. Like each chapter has a very specific game plan, like 3 things to go do. And we could have easily made them 5 to 10 things, but like people aren't going to do that many things. And if they do one thing, like, you know, I think one of the best chapters is a chapter on digital disconnection of
Bless America.
Which is deep work all over, right? Yeah. Just digital disconnection of how distracted we are in our life. It's just become overwhelming, right? Nobody has taught us how to use technology, how to turn it on, how to turn it off. Like all the entrepreneurs that I work with, they're on 24/7. They're getting calls, they're getting emails and all this stuff, right? And the simple strategy, live a do not disturb life.
Yeah.
If you read Deep Work, like you know how to turn your phone on airplane mode, you know how to turn it on do not disturb. And like honestly, during our call, I don't even know how my phone was still on my desk, but it was, and I got a text message. I'm like, okay, throwing it on do not disturb and threw it on the ground, so my attention
mine's in the other room.
Doesn't even go there during this call.
Yeah, I just can't. It's what's interesting to me is I don't have time is a common. So when we started this whole thing and people say to you, well, I don't have time to write, 5,000 words a day. My thing is exactly yours. 100 words adds up. It's like a change jar. You throw change in there, before you know it, you got $300 in there. Write 10 words, write 100 words, write 500 words, write something every day. It's going to add up. But people say, well, I just don't have time. And when you start a new eating plan, sometimes like, well, I don't really either, to be fair, but I've heard that some nutritional like coaches and stuff will say, how's your diet? And you'll say, it's awesome. And they'll say, write down everything you put in your mouth for a week. And all of a sudden,
McDonald's, Wendy's, chips, burgers.
Yeah, the whole thing.
One apple.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's how it is with time. So I tell people to do the same thing. I'm like, write down everything you do from the time you wake up until the time you go to bed. Because I promise you, I can find you 15 minutes.
15 minutes. One sec. I don't know if I grabbed I grabbed a couple of notebooks. Let me see if I grabbed.
Jesus?
Let me see. No, that's not the right one.
Is that Jesus?
Yeah.
Thought that was him.
We got Jesus next to Buddha, next to Mother Teresa and Gandhi, and I got the whole mix. And then I got Ganesh on the other side. Okay, so one of these one of these notebooks. I think it's this yellow one. Yeah, I did it for years.
Oh my God, you really did.
I did it for years. So these are like, I don't even know why these pages aren't like full.
Is that your whole schedule? Like, I can't really quite read it. I
did it for like 2 years, down to the minute what I was doing. Oh, sorry.
Wow. See, you're hard.
This day, like 8 to 8:30 write, 8:30 to 9 read, 9 to 9:30 shower, 9:30 to 10:30 write an article, 10:30 to 11 times. Like I was doing the times for the day before, right? Miscellaneous green work for an hour and 15 minutes. It was a productive day.
Well, that's like, have you ever seen this one, the self journal? It's the same thing. I mean, this is my whole day. It's just, you know.
No, and I started, what was a game changer for me that I started doing recently, which I talk about in the book. I got it over here. Let me grab it. Is I have 2 notebooks. One's a master running list of like anything I got to do, which I'm not very good at going back and doing the master list.
Yeah, I know.
Because it just gets so overwhelming. And then my day list of, you know, and so the game changer for me was taking the day list and putting it in my iPhone calendar of, you know, 4 to 5 talking to Elizabeth, from 3 to 4 doing emails, from, you know, getting really specific. I'm not very necessarily perfect at executing, but it makes it easier. Like we don't have to really think about what we have to do. We've already
what am I going to do now? Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
And then one of the final things for the digital distraction, I do Silent Sunday, where I do no technology on Sunday.
I know you do. I remember that. And then you have your gratitude letters. Are you still writing those? Or your thank you notes, or your...
Oh, thank you notes. Yeah. I don't even know how many I'm at for the year. I'm doing about 10 a month.
That's so cool. I think that's very cool.
Which has been a game changer for sure. Especially like the walk too, because it takes me 20 minutes. It's a good way of slowing down the day and breaking down the day of the walk. So yeah. All right. So I know we kind of went down some interesting rabbit holes. How do we... If anyone decides to watch this, how do we kind of pull it back in regards of, number one, like hire experts to help?
Yeah, please, like, I beg of you. Well, here's my thing: is don't think of self-publishing as crap.
So you're saying this to me, or you're saying this to?
I'm saying this. Well, yeah, but I'm also saying it like globally, like.
Okay, well, and this is where I think there's a difference between self-publishing and doing it the way that you're talking about. Like, those are two separate. Those are two separate categories.
No, I agree with you, but the way I'm talking about is like we don't have a name for it yet because it's almost like
small independent,
small press publishing or something. It's not a conglomerate where like. People still have control over their editor and their cover designer and I don't have anything to do with marketing because that's not my lane. That's not my lane. You know, launching is my lane, but marketing is not my lane. Like they're two very different things. So,
well, and we understand the small publisher because we've spent the time in the space.
Yeah.
You know, I've spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours studying books, like studying marketing plans, studying how to do it, webinar. Most people are never going to do that, right? And this is where they need a professional like yourself to, okay, you want to self-publish, here's how you do it. If you spend $2,000, like, and it's not an ungodly amount of money, like you buy 10 ISBN from Ingram or whatever, Bokers or what is it? Bokers? Bokers. Yeah. You buy 10 whatever of those and you do it this way and you go on Readsy and you get an editor and you go on Upwork and you do a cover and, you know, whether you'll get the ROI from it is a different story. But somebody looks at my book and they go, oh, okay, this is like, you know, and a big thing is testimonials, right? Like an owner of a sports team, you know, one of the most prolific speakers, business speakers, like, you know, the organization that I work for, Joe Polish, Steve Sims, you know, guys that run $500 million private equity companies, like, you know, that it goes somewhere.
But what you did more right than anything else is you knew exactly what the purpose of your book was. So it's funny because when I said, hey, let's chat about this, one of the first things I wanted to be like was, why do you not have a trade paperback? That was like my big thing. Now I understand why you don't have a trade. Now it makes sense to me. So it's kind of, when people don't take the time to assess that, it's like throwing Velcro balls against like a wall without Velcro when the Velcro's right over here. I like analogies.
No, I think they're good. People think in analogies.
You know, you just, it's not your lane.
No, I'm more like, just go straight to the point. Like, I don't even need stories. Although I know people do resonate with stories. I'm just like, just tell me what I got to do, and let's go there.
Well, that's compress time, like Chris Melodies does. Like, just compress time for me. I don't, you know, some people know what their lane is, and some people want to be in every lane. I don't know.
And this, I was actually listening to a podcast, like one of the 10 podcasts I've listened to this year. Very rare that I listen to podcasts because it's the same thing as books. Same thing as books, right? Like, we get so much information, bombarded by information. We don't, at least I don't implement it, right? And I was listening to a podcast. Oh man, what's her name? Gretchen Rubin on Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
And now I'm like totally forgetting
the Happiness Project.
The takeaway that I was getting to, condensing time. Oh my gosh, totally spaced it. Yep, zero idea.
Because I interrupted you, sorry. I got all excited about Gretchen Rubin.
No, I think what was the?
I feel like it was her second book, wasn't it?
Oh, that's what it was. So she has 4 archetypes in regards of how you operate in the world. And so I went and took the test, and I'm a questioner, right? So I'm very self-motivated. And if I'm going to take advice from somebody else, like, I have to really trust and respect them, which is, some people are like that. Some people aren't. Like, some people need the accountability. Like, I can set a goal. Okay, I'm publishing a book on my 30th birthday, and I'll get the team and I'll get it in place, and like, I'll be the one driving the ship, versus I want to write a book and it's going to be published in 2020, and I'm going to start writing it in 2019.
Right.
So,
but that's like when people say, I've spent 15 years working on my book. And I actually used to do that. I have a novel that I started probably 19 years ago. And so for many years, I was like, I've been working on this novel for 19 years. The fact of the matter is, Gordie, I have not opened that file in probably 14 years.
Sure.
You know, so it's kind of like,
half.
I mean, come on. So it's just like the mindset of, yeah, this took me 20 years to write. No, it didn't. But you knew
and I think, man, I think my gut, when people ask me now, you want to write a book? I think my response now is just going to be, don't do it. All these people, if anyone's going to decide to listen to this, don't do it. Don't write the book.
Publish this.
Pardon?
You can never make this go live now.
No, here's why. Because if they push through that, they actually have the tenacity to get the thing done. And if I can say, don't do it, and it's going to convince them not to do it, they don't have the whatever it's going to take to even start the process.
100%.
Right?
But that's the thing is, I always say this, you have to have, so if I talk to somebody and I say, well, talk to me about why you want to write a book. And they say, well, everyone's telling me I should write a book. I say, don't write a book. Because if your reason for writing a book is that everyone else is telling you that you should write a book, then you are going to resent the entire process. And when it comes time to sell the book, you're not going to want to do it, and you're not going to be comfortable with what you're selling. And it just becomes a total nightmare. So the first thing is you have to want to write the book for you and for your own purposes, whatever those may be, right? Whatever you determine them to be.
Sure.
But you have to have as much tenacity, and you're clearly, I think, on board with this, with the marketing as you did. There's no if I write it.
The real work begins the moment you release it in the world is when the real work begins. And this is where I did a very poor launch. I will be one of the first to admit I did a very poor launch because number one, I was like planning a birthday party, trying to finish it. Like I was so wrapped up in finishing the project because I had this release date of my 30th birthday, right? Like I could have easily pushed it out in September and done podcasts for 3 months and like done this big launch. For me, what was more important that I released my first book on 25 and my second book on 30. I didn't care if I hit Amazon #1 bestseller. Like that's not important to me because I know I'm in this. I'm going to speak about this book for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. And I put in the work and the meta going into it that I was willing. Like, if I never write another book again, I'm okay with that. Right. Okay. Like, I think this book, like, there can be updates and whatever, and it could potentially be like the connection effect for marketers, a connection effect for stay-at-home moms, a connection effect like.
Please do it audio with that voice.
I need to do an audio. That's another thing. I need to do an audio book for like. Haven't gotten.
But so here, let me ask you this. So you're like, I did it in hardback. So why do you want to do an audio?
Because a lot of my clientele. Entrepreneurs, they want it fast. They don't take the time for 3 hours. Yeah, in the commute time. My avatar is in their Tesla or in their Ferrari or in their Lambo. They're trying to get the most out of life, right?
Yeah.
The marketing. Yeah, the easy work is the other stuff. Well, and it really depends, like, what's your goal, right? Like, is if your goal to get it in 1,000 hands, like, okay, let's go down to downtown Phoenix and start throwing it out to.
But that's the problem right there. Not you're the problem. You are a real problem, Gordie. No, not you. But the problem.
Everybody knows this. That's been any amount of time with me.
Like, I think you probably are a little bit of one. But the problem is that if I say to somebody, what's your goal of your book? What's your goal with this book? And they say, I don't want to make any money off of it. I don't care if I make any money. I just want to help people. And I take them at their word, because what else can I do? So I say, okay. So we get it done, and it's great, and it's published, and it's out there, and it's not making any money because there's no, and then it's like, well, this isn't making any money. Well, so they're not even honest with themselves at the beginning many times because they feel like it's bad. And I get this, especially when people are writing any kind of like a self-help or a personal growth book. There's a feeling that I hear a lot that, well, it's my spiritual duty to like give this away, kind of. So it's bad for me
to write a blog.
Profit off of someone else's discomfort, right?
I mean, it goes back to the mindset, right? And most people haven't spent the time with themselves to really like figure this out. I spent 3 weeks on the outline for this book, right? Like, the outline was 61 pages, which is enough for a book, right? And we spent like 3 calls on like, what is your avatar and what is your desired goal, and let's go after that. And my desired goal is to book 50 speeches, right? Like, I know it's going to be a great ROI. If I book 2 speeches, it pays for the book, right? Like, it doesn't pay for my time, right? That comes with like another couple other speeches, right? But in my mindset of, if I do a hardcover, if I do a high quality book that potentially takes me to a different level and separates myself from other people in my field, and especially I think now I don't even know how it came across my desk because I don't read a lot of articles, and I've read 2 today and maybe it was within the other article of it's Apple is coming out with a software to help people on their smartphones less.
That's weird.
Because they know 7% of the world's population are addicted to their smartphones.
Yeah.
And so what is one of the chapters in this book is all about digital disconnection, right? Very few, deep work is talking about it, but he kind of goes to the extreme of no social media.
Right.
Set an autoresponder, and he's on one end of the extreme, and then the other end is just manage it. And then here's kind of Gordie in the middle of just take off one day a week and create a little bit better boundaries around it. I leave my phone on airplane mode till noon.
Yeah.
Today I didn't, and I had some calls and stuff, and it was, Friday's kind of my day of doing calls and reaching out to people with not much expectation, right? So it's a different day, but stuff started coming in and I'm distracted and I'm responding and
you're in reactive mode, not the opposite. I have one question. When you speak, what's your primary topic?
Connection, baby.
Okay, well, I figured it had something to do with that,
Yeah, no, what I have been known for the last couple of years, I've done a lot of work with high-performing families empowering their children.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that was a tagline for the last couple of years. This is how I ultimately, worked with royal family and Fortune 50 executives, 1,000 entrepreneurs, which led to the book of, the patterns and stuff that I saw within that, which ultimately became the foundation of the book. I've also done a lot of work in addiction, which I don't believe the opposite of addiction isn't recovery, it's connection. And this also pulls back to,
that's interesting.
Yeah, so, and one of my beliefs was ultimately led to the concept of the book is I believe the root of all human suffering is disconnection. And so ultimately, and this is where I've focused the last couple of years of connection is the solution. It is what we're looking for, right? First, we have to connect with ourselves, and then we can connect with the outside world, whether it's, a higher power or whether it's, in a Zoom interaction. But we first have to connect with ourselves, and most people will never do the work to know who they are.
There's no instant gratification there.
Well, it's the small things. This is where I spend 90 minutes every morning, trying to figure out this crazy mind of mine, this crazy life. And, I've figured out things that allow me to be a little bit better and show up in the world. Tomorrow, if I didn't do I won't do most of my morning routine because I have to be at University of Phoenix Stadium at 6:30 a.m. Which I'm not a morning guy, but whatever. We'll see how that goes.
Me either, so yeah.
Building my life resume and doing crazy things. But if I didn't do all my rituals for a month, I'm probably not going to start using drugs, or maybe a year or whatever. But I guarantee I'm going to be shorter fuse. I'm going to respond in ways that I'm not going to be proud of.
Right.
And, who am and this is which goes back to a large part of the connection factor. Let me just turn off the noise and be fully present with you, Elizabeth, in this, 45 minutes or an hour, however much time, and the rest of the world can wait. And most, especially entrepreneurs, are not doing that. No. I could have easily responded to 40 emails in this and, had text messages, and I was, somewhat taking notes, but even playing with the pen, right? There's moments where I wasn't fully engaged. So I guess to somewhat wrap up the recording, which I'm happy to put this rant out somewhere into the world, is number one, hire Elizabeth to help with the book process. You do need a professional, and as expensive as it is on the front end, it saves so much on the back end. And I guess number two, if you're going to do a book, do it right. There's so many people out there not doing it right. And God, I just got given a book that a friend's son wrote, and in the bio is personal development guru.
No.
I can't even have this book in my house. Like, it is literally at the front door to go get donated or something. Like, I'm like,
and doesn't that just hurt your heart? Like, it's
your
just
8 rules to wellness, your 8 rules to success. Like, and I think that's a different conversation, which I've had with some of my very wealthy friends. Of they become very wealthy and successful, and then they write books about their life principles, which are more of a glory trip in them trying to figure out why they became successful, when why they became successful, they have no idea why they became successful.
Right.
And then they give advice.
That's like Monday morning quarterbacking, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know?
So it's
But you know what I love about your approach and how you did it is because if I had gotten on with you today and I don't think I would do this because I'm not really a you should have kind of person or anything, especially unsolicited. But if anyone said to you, like, you know, you should have just gone with Create Space and done trade paperback and blah, 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 you can very confidently and comfortably say, no, that just wasn't the right approach. I know exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And those two things don't match up. Peace.
Oh, and we all, and I think this is where I've really learned so much from EO and YPO, which drastically changed the last couple of years of my life working with all these groups around the world, is number one, like the Gestalt method is my experience, right? And so many people are just giving out this free advice that they've never written a book.
Right.
Right. Like, and I'll be people ask me all the time, like, and this is part of the reason why we're doing this recording. Like, you want to write a book? Okay, here, go listen to this hour. Like, if you make it through this hour and you give me like 1 or 2 takeaways and you come at me with like really specific questions, I'll create time to go over it. But, you know, do the work, not like, oh, I met an author, like I'm going to ask like these 3 questions and they're going to teach me how to write. Like, I remember the goals for my first book.
Voices.
My goal for my first book is to sell 1 million copies. Like, I'm not throwing that goal away, but the only way that I'm going to sell 1 million copies with Eluding Reality, number 1 is to rewrite it, and number 2, have a movie produced. And
I might jump on that goal bandwagon with you. I like a good challenge.
Right? So, and I know in order to do 1 million copies, like, that's what has to transpire, because
you gotta have big reach. Yeah.
It's not there yet. You know, and is that, do I want, I mean, hitting New York Times bestseller, which we both know costs $250,000. And
New York Times, well, I shouldn't say that, but I feel like there might be New York Times bestselling authors living in an alley somewhere. I mean, maybe not, but the point is that this connotation of best-selling author is misunderstood.
So here are 2 things that I really love and I think are so valuable. Every single year, 350,000 books get published, yet 500 sell more than 50,000 copies. You do the math on that. What is it, like 0.01% of a book? Like,
yes.
And that also includes authors that have already published books and released books.
Yep. So
the chances of a new author selling 50,000 copies are like 1 in a billion. Mm-hmm. Like, it really is that, maybe like 1 in half a billion, but like it's very minimal. And then
are you saying in 1 year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Each year. 500 books sell more than 50,000 copies.
Well, the average author won't sell even 100 copies of their book. But
yeah, it's like 90% never sell 100 copies.
Discourages you or encourages you, like it, or motivates you. It depends on your mindset and your personality type. You know, because they're right.
Well, and I think it really depends, like, what's your goal with the book, and the second piece, which I've always kept this really close to my heart, is if you ask, oh man, I have this book and I've never read it, but guerrilla marketing.
Oh yeah.
What's his name? Joe.
It begins with an M, doesn't it?
I can't think of I don't know what his name is, but the guy who wrote Guerrilla Marketing, you asked him how much money he made from his first book, he will tell you $10 million. And he made 50,000 from selling copies and $9,950,000 from the other things that it brought him, whether it was, and this was years ago, so that $10 million is now like $100 million. But the speaking, the opportunity, this guy also had a list that you paid $1 a month to get his facts, which at the end of his life, when he died, there were 100,000 people on this list. It's pretty good living.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah,
not bad. Which goes back to one of my friends going, you need to figure out
how you're doing it.
You need to figure out how to sell every audience that you speak to, sell something that everybody in the audience can afford. Whether it's like $1 or $5 or $10, but make it an immediate yes. And then I haven't figured out that product, but
I don't know about that. That's a whole other discussion.
It's possible. It's
yeah.
possible.
We should have,
value, right? And
we have a show or.
Pardon?
Should we have our own show or?
If people see value in that, like, they want to pay, like, how to not write your book in 60 days.
No, I don't just mean that. Now I want to talk about, just sell something that everybody in the room can afford.
No, and ultimately it goes back to value creation. And this is, I think we're in a really interesting space, as in 2018, of there is so much information out there and there is so much free information, and we have been trained and manipulated, and we go on social media, and social media is not free. Like, Facebook is getting paid every minute that we are on their platform. Yeah. It is not a free platform. And this goes back to my book, The Connection Effect. I believe for the next decade, our currency is going to be our focus and our ability to focus. And this is where a book like Deep Work, you figure out how to focus, you figure out how to turn off the distractions, you figure out how to connect with those around you, and you will live a different life than a lot of people are destined to right now.